You are listening to Girls, Ghosts, Ghouls, a podcast where three women discuss horror movies from the silent era through the 1970s. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Spotify, and Anchor. Timely, topical, terrifying. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Samhain episode of Girls, Ghosts, Ghouls. And we are pleased to bring to you a movie that we enjoy greatly and is, in our opinion, a masterpiece. And given that it's October, is perfect. And that is John Carpenter's Halloween. Though it should actually be John Carpenter's and Debra Hill's Halloween, in my opinion. But, you know, John Carpenter. But yes, so this comes in just under our wheelhouse wire because it's a 1978 release, but doesn't hit the 1980 mark. So we're good. But yeah, after a run of several crappy movies, even though we've been doing some good ones lately, we still wanted to have some nice, good, decent, true horror movies to do again, especially for the Halloween season, because we're all spooky girls. We love this season. This is our time. So
I think it needs to be longer.
yes, Halloween
Our
should be all
season.
fall. All of fall should be up until like December 24th. Then you can have your Christmas.
Honestly, sometimes for me it goes straight on through because I'm like, oh, I'm just gonna do a bat tree for Christmas. You never know.
I'm all for year-round Halloween, honestly. But all right, to focus. So John Carpenter's Halloween, 1978 movie. Though actually the premise, so like John Carpenter gets all the credit, but the premise came from, I can't remember the guy's name, but he was a movie distributor come like film studio creator, and he wanted John Carpenter. So like I'm trying to remember the timeline, and ladies please jump in and correct me, but if I recall correctly, he decided to become, go into the movie business, do movie studios, put out movies, distribute them, and he was looking for stuff to distribute, but this is like during like the 60s, and the film industry was kind of tanking at this point. There wasn't a lot going on. I mean, there was some good stuff going on. You had Psycho and stuff coming out, but it was starting to have like a downward slide where a lot of people just weren't going to the movies as much. It was more like live concerts and things like that were drawing them in now. And John Carpenter had made a movie called The Siege, which I believe actually later on got titled as Attack on Precinct 13, which also has been remade. It's an excellent film. Both the original and the remake was pretty fun too. But he couldn't find anybody to distribute the film. John Carpenter couldn't. And so this guy whose name I keep forgetting, so please look it up and throw it in, or I'll stick it in later in little captions to tell you his name. But it's been a week, so bear with me. He gets a hold of it. People reached out to him. He's like, yes, this is an excellent movie. And he put it out there. It won some awards. So he wanted to do a project specifically with John Carpenter. And so he was trying to think of something. He's like, what about like a holiday themed scary movie kind of thing? He's like, why don't we do it on Halloween? He's like, somebody's got to thought of this. Somebody has had to have thought of doing like a horror movie on Halloween that's set on Halloween. And he looked up, and like, not only was there never a movie called Halloween, there was never even a movie at that time that had Halloween in the title. So he's like, score. And so then he went to John Carpenter, who wrote up, the basic story with Debra Hill's help, because he had worked with her also on Attack on Precinct 13 / The Siege. And you have masterpiece here. So
Yeah, and part of the deal for him doing the directing was he wanted his name on it.
yes. So
yeah, the title must include my name. Well, okay.
I think he only got paid like $10,000 or $20,000 for it.
It was, yeah. I don't think
and then he
much.
also got a portion of the net profits from it, which ended up being bank. But at the time, nobody thought it would be.
Yeah, because it was a low budget movie. The budget was like 300,000, and 70,000 of it went to, and 70,000 of it went to equipment for shooting. Because they got like a top of the line camera and everything, and he put in some new techniques that hadn't been used before. So the argument was that, hey, if it looks like it's shot really, really professionally, people won't care that it's low budget. And I kind of think from the reception that he was right.
Yeah, but yeah, it ended up being 320,000 total because they brought on Donald Pleasance, and they had to give him a little extra money because he was the big name actor.
No. He is. I was shocked when I looked up his IMDb. I was like, Oh, he was in that episode of Twilight Zone. Shit, you're right. Oh, he was good.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a
Very
very wide
prolific
range.
until his death. I think he died of cancer, actually, sadly.
Mm-hmm. I think
Um,
so. I think you're right.
but yeah. So Rebecca had brought up a documentary. I forgot the name of it already, but it was an excellent documentary. That
There were a couple. There was one that was overarching on the whole Halloween series, and then there was another one that was just the Halloween movie
Yes, I'm thinking
itself.
of that one, the one that you found on
Okay.
YouTube. I think it was called Halloween: A Cut Above the Rest.
Yes. Yeah, that was the one.
And then also, so I watched that actually just today, and yet I still forgot people's names, sadly. And I also watched because Betsy reminded me that this was out there. The movies that made us on Netflix. There is an episode, I think it's season 3, that is
Yes.
Halloween. Now, but if you watch them both, so I didn't get all the way through the stories that made us this time around. I watched it all before, but so in the 2000 or in the Cut Above the Rest documentary, which I'm not sure what date, what year that was, but it had to be sometime before 2005 because Debra Hill died in 2005, and she's in this documentary. They say that they actually were looking for Peter Cushing to play the part of Dr. Loomis that was played by Donald Pleasence, but he's doing Star Wars, and so he was not interested. But in the Netflix one, they said they were trying to get Christopher Lee, and Christopher Lee just said no. So I don't know if the story changed over the years or if they highlighted they wanted Peter Cushing in this one and highlighted they also went after Christopher Lee in that one. I don't know. But
now I'm thinking of all the what ifs if it had been Peter Cushing. What if it had been Lee?
I want to say that in the like special about on IMDb, it listed that both of these men were approached to possibly play the roles. So I'm gonna guess that they did one of those these are our ideal people, and then his third person was Pleasance, and Pleasance said yes. Which there was a really funny story about that too. I don't know if you guys read that one or if they told that one, where Donald Pleasance was really cold with him when he first got on set. Like he wasn't very nice at all. And John Carpenter's like, "Oh, okay." And then Pleasance later was like, "I was just messing with you. I wanted to see
Yeah, I did.
if you were really serious about this or not." And then was super nice to work with and great. But yeah, at first he was a little cold and like, this is a stupid movie and whatever. And
I don't get it. Why am I here? What is this motivation?
Why am I here? I don't understand this. And John Carpenter's like,
motivation is box office sales. There's your mark. Get on it.
Yeah. So it was 2003. That's when Halloween: A Cut Above the Rest was put out there. So it was 2 years before Debra Hill sadly left us. She died of cancer, sadly. Because Debra Hill, great. She just did so much great writing. She partnered with John Carpenter on a couple other projects as well, and did some stuff on her own. She was a producer. She produced a lot of things, including one of my favorite movies, which is Clue. Which is
love that movie.
And like basically she's who shaped the female characters in Halloween. She gave their dialogue, she gave them the personality. That was Debra Hill. And those are the main characters. So
yeah. I loved actually the snappiness and the bluntness of the female characters, even the minor ones, her friends. Mm-hmm. They're walking back from school at the end of the day, and somebody says, "Oh, he's going." They're talking about meeting up with their boyfriends, and one makes a remark about, "Oh, going into uncharted territory, is it?" And the other one's, "Oh no, that territory's been charted." I was like, "Ah, oh, that's great," and that is pretty much how girls would talk. So.
I really liked that their relationships, like the friendships between the girls, seemed like real relationships. Like they didn't seem pitted against each other. They didn't seem like they were competing in any way. They seemed pretty supportive of each other. Even the ones that were supposed to be like easy or whatever were
it was like good nature jibing. It wasn't like judgment.
Yeah, it wasn't like judgment ever. It was more like, "Boo, you whore," rather than like being mean to each other.
It didn't feel mean. Even when she's like, "I forgot my chemistry book," and the other student was like, "Oh, just, I forgot mine and my math book and my English book."
Back to all my books. Got all of them.
Yeah, she just forget about it. But they weren't nastily making fun of Lori for having all her stuff home. It, like you said, it did seem good natured.
Yeah, I will credit her on that. I feel like she really wrote women well. And I think that's because it was a woman writing women.
Could be. I don't know.
She did not breast boobily down the hallway, like as if a man were writing there.
Or make it a petty,
petty bickering between them, like they were competitive with each other in any way, shape, or form.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't feel like any of that. When they found out that Lori had a crush on a guy, they were like, oh my God, well, I'm gonna call him. And she's like, don't do that. And they're like, I'm gonna call him.
We did it. Which I haven't been the actual shy, awkward, and not actually having, like, I felt Lori's pain when she was like, she called him, like, oh God, no, this guy's only going to be talking to me because you did this and this is awful. Oh, I feel so, like I felt that moment very deeply.
Same. I was far closer to a Lori when I was in school than I was to any of her friends who were nice and outgoing.
I was Lori in school.
Like,
same.
Oh, you want to bring another child for me to babysit? Cool.
I was Lori minus the babysit instinct. I'm like, that's not my thing. Those kids would be dead if I was a babysitter. I'd be like, I'm out. Fend for yourself.
Do it on purpose.
By high school, I did some, but it was mostly my cousin. And quite frankly, as in it for the it did it for the money. Money. Hi,
my
Chunk.
little sister aside, I mean, I watched her and I would have defended her with my life and somebody else's. But other than that, you're not paying me enough to defend these kids with my life. So therefore, tough.
You get nothing.
Run, kids. They went that way.
Bye.
But Jamie Lee Curtis, interestingly enough, was not a Lori. She was a PJ Souls character and not a Lori. And she was worried that she wouldn't be able to pull off Lori because that's not who she was in high school. And she was only, I think, barely 20 when she did this role, which is interesting because the other two women, Nancy Loomis and PJ Souls, they were like almost 30. They were 28, 29 years old when they did this. So Jamie Lee was the young one. And this was her first feature film. And she, was carrying it because she was the main character. And, almost there's very few scenes without her in it. Let's put it that way.
Truly.
And she did an excellent job. And I think she was Debra Hill's pick, if I recall correctly. Debra Hill was like, she's out there, she's doing the TV stuff. She was a contract actress at the time, Jamie Lee was, doing small bit parts here and there. And, Debra Hill's like, the lineage for this movie, get this girl in here. I mean, her mom was iconic in Psycho. This is perfect, let's get her in here. So, and they use that also as part of a way to like bolster the film and get advertising.
I mean, if you have, Janet Leigh's daughter, yeah, I would also do that. Like,
I'm not
it's the horror movie Next Generation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, truly,
absolutely made for it, really. A role she was born to do. I'm sure they probably. I have no recall of that. I was 3 when it came out, but I'm sure they did something of the like, and maybe
they didn't do a huge amount of promotion at first. They did a soft opening in Kansas City because they're like, all right, look, if it really, really bombs here, we can still take it somewhere else and be like, hey, look at this movie, and we got a second chance. But it didn't bomb the weekend it went out. It went maybe not as much as they'd hoped, but it kept growing and growing because there was word of mouth. People would go home, call up their buddy and be like, oh my God, you got to go see this. And so that was how it grew and grew.
Absolutely. Yeah. A question for you, ladies. So like, I always forget, like when you think of Halloween, you think slasher, you think blood, you think gore, you think, and then you watch it again and you're like, no, there's barely any blood. You don't actually see any knife. And there's some things where it's obviously like in retro, like I watched it, obviously recently for the podcast, and you can distinctly tell the first kill was somebody stabbing a melon, like, and that poor actress playing the sister was not that good. you know, I mean,
Oh,
she was trying her best. And
yeah,
I'm not an actress, so I should shut up. But it was
the initial scene of the murder where she's murdered by a 6-year-old. Can't you just hold, grab the flailing arm and punch the kid in the face? But then again, we wouldn't have a movie,
no.
If it wasn't extreme suspension of disbelief with that scene.
She was too naked to fight back.
There we go. Got it. Titties out. You just can't think anymore. You're just thinking,
Apparently.
cover the girls, and now I'm getting stabbed. Help me.
And then how he goes outside and he's just standing on the sidewalk, with a vacant look in his face, knife in his hand, and his parents come up. Michael, and they're just standing there. And the mother's just got her hands in her pockets. I'm like, your child is standing there with a knife, which probably has blood on it.
The mother screams like, oh my God.
Are you not going to have a little bit more of a reaction?
Oh, no. I mean, like, first of all, there had to be some other signs, right? I mean, in my opinion. I could be wrong, but, also if it was me and I actually had a kid, which we all know that that's never going to be a thing, and it came out with a knife, I'd be like, fuck, see, now this is why you should have been an abortion.
Yeah. There is a reason.
I should not breathe.
No children are happening for me.
Crazy runs deep in my family, and this is not a surprise to anybody who's met two of my relatives. So yeah.
We want to go over the basics of Halloween, or do we assume that anyone who would be watching this has watched Halloween in their life?
If you haven't, stop listening to us. Go watch Halloween. It's streaming so many places right now. It's October. And if it's not, pay for it. I mean, if it's not free, pay for it. It's just worth it.
$3, $3 or $4 on Amazon.
I was going to say, and then come back. But we're not going to do a plot for this because honestly, if you haven't seen Halloween and you're watching this, shame on you. Shame on you.
And
this is even like a classic. Like, I understand not watching the black and white ones. I totally get
not Rob Zombie's, John Carpenter's. No disrespect to Rob Zombie, but yeah, you need to see the original because Zombie did his thing. It's not John Carpenter. And John Carpenter was
the Carpenter version. Why did I say Carpenter version? The original, frankly. It's a slasher film, so you're not exactly heavy on plot. Let's face it. We all know the formula, and this was
kind of started the formula.
I kind of look at it is you could call Psycho a slasher film in a way, a little bit more of a thriller, but this one starts to hit more of the tropes. The easy girls are killed first. The final girl is the virgin. Whatnot.
I don't know if this was in any of the things, but I read it and it made me laugh hysterically. John Carpenter said he never intended for that to happen. He never intended for there to be like the virginal girl comes last or like survives. It literally just happened because the other girls were distracted better because they were distracted having sex and Laurie was paying attention the whole time. This is how that happened.
Keep in mind, the first girl who gets murdered was not actually having sex at the time. Now, she was driving out to go get her boy to have sex.
Yeah, she was trying for sex. She was distracted by sex that wasn't happening yet.
Not the act, but the intention for the act.
The intention of the act. But yeah, he said that was not what he was trying to do. And of course, it became a big trope. And he's like, that was not the intention when we started this. It was just that she was paying more attention than these other girls were. The other girls were distracted by this, that, and the other thing.
They were easier, but not because they were easy necessarily, but kind of.
Correct. Because they were basically like, their head was somewhere else. Whereas Laurie had already seen the guy and was already a little bit freaked out. And so she was already catching like little bits of him because she had already seen him. We know she saw him because there were multiple times when she was like, there's a man standing over there. And then people would go to look and they wouldn't be there anymore. And she's like,
I thought those were very well done. I really enjoyed those because it's almost like, you see the flash something out of your corner of your eye. You're like, what the? And you look and you're like, oh, okay. But I saw something. I know I did, but nobody else saw something. And it
played on it very well. It played on the level that you actually experienced very well.
And I like that there were times when the kid saw it. And the kid was like, there's a man out there. And then she'd go to look and he's gone again. And it built up that tension for her really, really well. Like, she's seeing things and then he's seeing things. And it's just building and building and building and building. So when it actually does hit, it's so worth it. And she's already so keyed up that it's
well, and it also serves to put her guard down because she sees it, but then nobody else sees it, and then the kid says he sees it and there's nothing there, so she's telling the kid and herself at this point that there's nothing, and you're just getting worked up over everything.
right.
And then it starts to get weird, right? Her guard's a little bit lower.
Yeah, because she's second guessing herself. It's like you said, Jenny, she's telling the kid, oh, look, there's nothing there. And she's going to use that and it's going to make her second guess her experience previously, even though she knows what she saw.
Mm-hmm.
How your mind works against you.
Yeah. We don't want it to be a killer. We want it to be nothing. It's much better figment of our imagination than if it is somebody stalking us, right? So.
You want it to be the jackass down the street who's just getting up for Halloween,
Exactly. Yeah, we don't want it to be somebody. And it's very easy to talk yourself into, I'm just deluding myself. There's nothing actually there. There are so many good moments in this movie that are like funny and like I about died. And I know it's rude when Michael Myers came back wearing the sheet over his head to kill the girl in the bed. And he's wearing the sheet with his glasses over it.
So hokey, but so wonderful. Fun fact also from the lovely documentary. So PJ Souls at the time was married to Dennis Quaid. And Carpenter was like, hey, you want to see if he wants to play your boyfriend? But Dennis Quaid was not available. I think he was doing some kind of TV movie at the time. But imagine that, like getting a shirtless Dennis Quaid in there. I mean, that's a whole other aspect that would have been. Bring me that version, for sure.
Right?
But then I'd been really sad when he got pinned to the wall by a knife, though.
That's very true. That's very true.
Which, by the way, The Shape, aka Mike Myers, played this was it Nick Castle, I believe, who was also a director, but was not really. He was a friend of John Carpenter's. They went to school together, but he wasn't really doing anything at the time. But he was in the same city, so John was like, "Hey, come do this for me, and I'll pay you $25 a day, and come on." And like, okay.
Well, and from what I read, there was a lot of that going on the site because you'd have some people working for very little, and then they're like, "Shit, this other stuff we need somebody for this," and they'd be like, "Hey, girlfriend, do you want to come down and do work on the set?" And
yeah,
sure.
Yeah, I read in the IMDb that Robert Englund was on site helping bag leaves and put leaves around on set. Because he was friends with John Carpenter. So Freddy Krueger was on site playing around on the site of Halloween.
Oh no, I'm thinking of Freddy versus Jason.
Jason, yeah. No, it's
yeah, there has not been a Freddy versus Mike Myers or Jason versus Mike Myers.
Jason versus Mike Myers.
Hey, what about a battle royale?
Oh, that's tough.
Who battle royale? Just put Survivor Island with all the horror icons.
We should write it.
I'm for this. Let's do this. But yeah. Well, back to the leaves. So this was filmed in California, and it doesn't actually have fall there. In Los Angeles doesn't have fall. And if you look at the opening scenes, you can see palm trees. John Carpenter's a little upset about it. They did the best they could to shoot around them, though, and it's like one of the only scenes where you see them. But yeah, so they brought in bags of leaves and stuck them in a fan so that you can get a fall effect in an area that did not actually have fall.
I thought they did a good job.
And then they would rake them up and rebag them and do it again.
Honestly, considering the budget of this movie and considering the everything else that they had going on, I thought there was a lot of really quality stuff here where they really cheated a lot. Like they did good cheats to cheat to make sure that it was really scary. But I loved one of the fun facts was that people kept saying, oh, when they revealed Michael Myers' face and it was all disfigured. And he's like, it's not like that. It's literally people were convinced that he had to be a monster, so he must have looked monstrous when the mask came off. And he's like, that was just a guy. Like, it was just a guy's face.
Yeah.
There's nothing scary or monstrous about him.
I forget that he's revealed. Like when you watch the movie, you've watched all of them, you keep watching the remakes and stuff. They do their best to never reveal him. And I think there's been a couple others where he has been revealed, but you always forget. And you always forget in the first one, they did in fact show his face at the end.
Yeah, very, and it's quick. If you blink, you'll miss it.
Yeah,
but she rips that mask
just
right
a plain
off.
looking dude that has an expression on his face, and that's what
that's
what they wanted.
Yeah, and it keys in too with something you said, Jenny, was how in the script they referred to him as the Shape. It's never, the monster, Michael Myers, etc. It was the Shape is walking down the hall, etc., etc. Mm-hmm. And they were really trying to portray him as this force of nature, almost.
Yeah, more of an amorphous, not non-human,
Yes. Kind of. Yeah.
So yeah, it's really interesting. And of course, everybody knows the iconic story behind the mask, but I think people forget that another choice was going to be a creepy clown mask. So we could have had, a creepy clown movie before we had it. I don't think it would have worked as well in this sense. I love that they went with the
yeah,
William Shatner mask. I'm sorry, it's funny every time. But it's funny because there's a couple urban legends about, like, the first one is that it was actually turned inside out and all this, but it really wasn't. They just took the mask, shaved off the eyebrows, opened up the eye holes, mussed up the hair, got rid of the sideburns, and like painted it a little whiter. That's all they did. And John Carpenter will say, it's like, first of all, this mask looked nothing like William Shatner. It was pretty featureless to begin with, so it wasn't hard to do. But they really liked the featurelessness of it. They wanted this just blank kind of overlay and just the dead eyes throwing out from it. And I don't think anything else would have played as well, honestly.
Honestly, I think a clown might have been okay. I'm going to say the words. I think a clown might have been too scary. Like, it would have been too traditionally scary, because what made him scary was how plain he is. Yeah, that he's wearing just the overalls and that mask, and there's no expression in his body, or because his body never really shows expression either. He doesn't look like hulking, like he's like at you. He just stands there, blank face, blank. It's so effective. It's so effective. And still, like, I'm watching this and I'm like, this is a damn good movie. Still a damn good movie.
And again, not one word of dialogue from him as well. No. Which you got to think, as a victim, if you're trying to bargain, you're trying to do anything to get out, nothing would work because he's implacable and resolute. Yeah. So why does he need to speak? Everything is already made up in his mind.
I don't know why this triggered this, but the one thing that's always been a large plot hole, which they actually kind of openly address in the movie, is like, how, if he's been in an institution since he was 6, did he drive? And I just love that, like, in the conversation, like when Samuel Loomis Donald Pleasance is talking to the administrator, I assume, of the asylum that Mike Myers escaped from, he's like, I don't know, maybe one of your staff taught him how to drive.
Yeah.
So I thought that was hilarious, because it's like, they're like, yeah, we don't know, but we're just going to throw that in there.
I did read that there was a novelization that was written like a year after this film came out, because they did that a lot at the time. They would write a novelization. In the novelization, they say that he learned because he watched the people who would drive him back and forth from the asylum for his trials, or for his, like, whatever. That's how they explained it, that he learned by watching. And I'm like, I mean, sure, I guess.
The other, right? I mean, to be honest, it's not terribly complicated to figure out how to drive if you're not looking at a stick shift.
This is what I was thinking. I'm like, it's not, to be honest, if you're an adult person who sits in a car for the first time, I mean, the first little bit may be wobbly, but he was also in the country, so he probably caught on pretty fast once he got
time to figure it out.
Yeah.
I mean, admittedly, when he grabs the car and goes, it doesn't look like it's taking him a lot of time to figure it out. But
That's
again,
true.
like I said, I think it makes it more fun when there's a plot hole, or more even believable when there's a plot hole. And in the movie, they even address the plot hole. Like, I think that just added to it in a good way. Whereas instead of you going, oh, really, he's just going to jump in this car and fucking drive when he's been in there since the 6th, when you have the doctor going, did you teach him to drive? You know, like, what the
Right, like, how does he know how to drive? And he's like, no. Maybe he took a correspondence course. Oh,
TV, I got nothing.
Yeah.
I mean, nowadays the answer would be YouTube, but you know,
right.
Google
You're
will tell
right, though. It is. There are lots of places in this movie where they do poke fun at themselves a little bit. Which is fun to watch. That makes the movie more fun. Because there are even times when they're like, what do you think, a killer's gonna come and get you back? And you're like,
Really? Really?
but I like that part of it. It does remind me of what would later happen. Like, this is obvious a progenitor, and we know it is because they just straight up, but like Scream, like where it has a sense of humor about itself. This has a sense of humor about itself. It's not a movie that takes itself too seriously. It's a scary movie, but it's not a movie that takes itself too seriously. It doesn't come into it with the gravitas of I'm going to be the grand horror movie. It comes in with like, this is going to be a fun slasher flick for Halloween. Let's do it. And it works so well that way. Just really like it.
I thought they did a good job. And especially having it not be a gory film. Because you're
No,
not seeing buckets of blood in this. And I'm sure, yes, partially was because it kept the special effects budget down. But if you ask me, it ratchets up the tension because you know there's evil and you're not seeing it. You know, when is it going to hit? You don't even have your first kill until something like 50, 55 minutes into the movie.
well, your first visible kill, because you know they show a body on the side from when he, you know, where he you have Sam Loomis.
Yeah.
So they don't show him doing the kill, you just see a body. So you
Yeah, and it was implied, but
I would also say that I do recall from one of those documentaries that what was his name, Mustafa, the money guy who came up with the 320,000. He actually didn't want the gore. That was one of the reasons also that there was none. It's not really in the movie. He's like, I don't want blood and gore and stuff. I don't really want to do that kind of thing. So that also, one, again, does save them on the budget because you don't have to do practical effects as much. And two, you know, it wasn't wanted by the person who was handing the money. And but again, to the fact it plays well, like literally your brain just inserts the gore for you. Like you forget it's not there, and then you watch the movie and you're like, oh yeah, there isn't blood flying everywhere. That's right. Of course, later versions you do get the blood flying everywhere,
but not in this one.
no,
Not in this one.
your brain just kind of inserts it for you.
I was gonna say, and I would say that obviously I've watched it very, very recently, but I would say that if in the past you had been like, so is Halloween a bloody movie? I probably would have said yes. Just thinking about it. And then realized, no, it's not. It's not a bloody movie at all. There are far bloodier movies. Friday the 13th was far bloodier than this.
oh yeah, big time.
Psycho technically was far bloodier. Yes.
Truly, truly. Psycho was much bloodier because of the bathtub scene by itself. Sorry for that gesture. But it is funny that way, how it's very, very scary. It maintains itself, but it doesn't have any of the like big shocking like gushes of blood like they would have later, even in some of those beginning, like those standard horror movies, slasher movies that we all know and love. The Final Girl movies.
True.
I mean, and we got our first Final Girl, and like I just think Jamie Lee Curtis is the best. I adore everything I see about her. I love how she's supportive of her children. I love it. Just she's a beautiful person.
I was going to say her support for the LGBTQIA community, her outspokenness, like during the recent strikes, even before the Actors Guild was in a strike, when the Writers Guild was just striking, she was right there, like for them. Um, she's the best. I just like her so much. just you. Like,
Yeah, I wanted to be my mom. I'm not gonna lie. I love my mom, but I want Jamie Lee Curtis for my mom.
she's one of those people that I'm like, I would love to get a chance to meet Jamie Lee Curtis. I would kind of die and scream and cry at her, but I would have a really good time dying, screaming, and crying at her. So
Yeah.
and I think she'd handle it well. She'd be like, "Oh, honey, oh no."
I'm sure she's used to it. I'm sure she's used to it.
So I guess this is my weird way of looping this in. So I have to shout out to Betsy's mom, Carla, who is a lovely person. So she was over, her and Betsy's sister Tracy were over my house watching Halloween with me while I was doing a review for this, and we were sampling out Halloween themed cocktails. And there's the scene where Mike Myers had been chasing, Lori around, and Lori ended up in a closet, and she starts reshaping a hanger to defend herself. And all of a sudden, Carla goes, "Yes, abort that motherfucker!" And I just thought it was the best thing I had ever heard. It was so beautiful. It was so perfect, so well timed. And I was like, yes.
That's a Carla thing. Yep.
Shout out to my mom.
Yes.
That is my mother.
I loved it.
I love the past, I'm gonna say 5 Christmases. We do like taco bar, and that's fine, and then we drink margaritas, and then we sit down to watch a movie together. And the last like 5 Christmases have led to us watching horror movies on Christmas Day. So
I think that's appropriate because during the Victorian times, Charles Dickens and whatnot, that's what you did at Christmas. You told ghost stories.
oh yeah.
So you're just being traditional.
Yeah.
And
So
now we have Violent Night.
that's gonna be
best Christmas movie ever.
It's part of my Christmas repertoire now.
But anyway, back to Halloween. Let's get on this holiday.
Another fun thing about Halloween, so like the opening kill with baby Mike Myers coming up the stairs and the clown mask, that was actually Debra Hill creeping up the stairs with a knife, stabbing people. That is the innovative camera that they used to shoot that scene, so you get that nice steady follow along. If you notice, there's no bumpy camera going. They had a still camera.
They had a steady cam
stairs and stuff. Yeah, thank you, steady cam. And I think it was well worth it because it really kind of set that perspective, and that was in a beautiful way. Just a great perspective shot of the killer, who's this big, and I thought it was great.
We talked about that was a big part of the budget, but literally the Steadicam was one of the big parts of the budget because it was new, very, very new. They were only using it on like couple properties, so they actually had to locate one, bring it in, use it, and it was very expensive. So I think that's very interesting that that is one of the things that makes, because there are later points of view where they use it again, and I think it does make some of those scenes where he's moving and it's so perfectly even. I'm like, it's beautiful. I need to stop talking with my hands.
Well, part of this video, so I think you're fine. And what I did enjoy was how much they made it feel like you are always being watched. It felt, as we've said on other movies, the way something is shot often feels very voyeuristic, and this did.
Yeah, it did. I think it set the stage for other people to. Yeah, I think it. The horror film kind of grew out of that. The babysitter killer thing kind of came out of that too.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of stuff. I mean, it's iconic. I can't say how I really love this film so much.
It's a fun one.
Truly, it's such a good film. And even like silly little things that happen in this film, like the little boy that she's watching gets bullied at one point. It's the kid that she's babysitting. He gets bullied at one point and it breaks his pumpkin, and she's bringing a pumpkin for him to carve. So like she kind of replaces the pumpkin, not even realizing that his got broken, which I think is kind of cool. But then there's that moment where Mike Myers is kind of scoping him out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you're not sure if the kid's going to be the target.
Yeah, there's no way that Mike Myers would know that that girl and that kid are going to be connected at some point during the day until later.
Well, no, because they start the day at the house, remember? Before school, Lori and the little boy
Oh,
she ends
that's
up
true.
kissing.
Yeah,
But I
they're
mean,
walking together.
he wouldn't know that she was going to be babysitting him later for sure. But I mean, the connection was sort of established. And there's been theories that the whole idea was supposed to be that the kid kind of represented him and Lori kind of
He
represented
represented his
the
sister.
killed. And I don't really know if they were really going for that or not, but I think they kind of hint at it in the one documentary that they were going for Lori to be sort of hitting him as his sister, but I don't know if he identified with the little boy as himself at all, though.
Right.
I also like how so another interesting, so a lot of this stuff was influenced by Psycho, because John Carpenter was a huge fan, as was Debra Hill, and that's why Donald Pleasant's character is named Dr. Sam Loomis, because it's Sam Loomis after the Sam Loomis from Psycho.
Right.
Which also made Jamie Lee sort of a big deal for him to get. But another interesting thing is like the perspective. I mean, almost always you kind of want to know what is the motivation behind the killer, but it just doesn't seem to bother me in this one that the motivation isn't really there. And I don't know if it's because he set the stage with the doctor saying, I've spent what was it, the first 7 years trying to break through and find out, get this kid to open up to me, and then the rest of it just trying to keep him in there because all it was pure evil. That's
Yeah, and I do think that actually helps. Having literally just someone come in and be like, this person kills so much because they're a psychopath. That's it. Like there's no, not a psychopath, but like this is just what he does. He doesn't have,
Sometimes things aren't complicated.
right.
Some beat, he didn't have a bad thing, he was just a terrible human being. Just a sick kid, which is interesting because Rob Zombie's take on it was that he wanted to give a background established, and that's why when you see his version, there's a whole intro background to this kid with his bad dysfunctional family environment and becoming a psychopath through that. And I mean, it is what it was, and I'm not mad about it, but I again obviously strongly prefer John Carpenter's, and so I do much prefer the take that you sometimes somebody is just evil because they're evil.
Right.
It
Some
wasn't
people
mom,
just
dad,
are
it
good
wasn't
people.
anything else.
Yeah.
Some people are just assholes.
Yeah, some people are just not great people, and that's just kind of the way it is. And there's nothing to be done about it. And I do appreciate that. I do appreciate that they don't try to like, well, his daddy touched him when he was little, and you're like, I mean, okay, I don't need to feel for him.
Yeah.
Some things are just broken from the start.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and the reason, and for me, the reason why I get kind of annoyed when you hear well, because this happened. Well, that happens. Just terrible, shitty things happen to so many people, and so many of them don't become fucking killers, rapists, abusers. They become one functional, normal for us kind of people, or they even become better people. Not that makes it better, but they overcome it because of who they are, and then they go on to do things like save other people. So. I mean, so every time I hear the rhetoric, well, you have to understand where they came from. I'm like, no, because they made a choice. They didn't make a choice to be a victim, obviously, but they made a choice about who to become afterwards.
Right.
That's on you.
You may not have had a choice to be a victim or be, have things happen to you, but you do make a choice when you make someone else the victim or make someone else do something to someone else. That is where you've made a choice. Sorry. Yeah, no, I feel kind of the same way. When people are like, well, the serial killer, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, nope, I don't care. I don't care what his background was. He could have been raised by wolves, and I still wouldn't let that be an excuse to why he's
I would expect better out of him if he was raised by
wolves. Yes.
I'm like, no, this does not give you an excuse to be a dick. Sorry.
Yeah, I was perfectly happy that they did not go into any huge backstory with the character, because frankly, I don't think they needed to. It's
scarier this
what
way.
mentioned in the script. He was the shape. He was the elemental force. He was the thing that is.
Yeah. I completely 100% accept that Michael Myers is just a shitty person who got out and started killing people again, because as soon as he got out, he was going to start killing people again. But I don't need anything else. I don't need a scary backstory. I don't need for kids to have been having sex when he drowned in a lake. I don't need it.
Fair. Another fun thing that I don't know if you guys caught this, but the Dr. Demento movie they were watching, the kids were watching during the babysitter scene, was The Thing from Outer Space. And that is what,
yes.
if that became the thing.
Yeah, I did
John
know
Carpenter redid
that
it.
that was the movie, but I knew that The Thing from Outer Space was the inspo for The Thing. Or
yeah.
source
which I mean came out, I think, was it 83 The Thing came out?
Yeah, apparently Carpenter already had it in his mind that he wanted to do a remake of this particular property, so he threw it in
82
there.
came out in 82, sorry. Yeah, so I just loved it, and I don't think I had noticed that prior to my couple rewatches that I did this time. I was like, oh
yeah,
my God,
I was rewatching
thing.
it today, and I was like, I wish I knew what movie that was. I'm gonna have to look it up.
Sorry, it was that thing, The Thing from Another World.
Yes, The Thing from Another World.
And it was a 1951 movie.
Okay. It did have that 1951 feel.
It did.
I want a lot of awful sci-fi from that time.
So yeah, I was super excited about it.
Pretty brilliant too, and just a cool idea that that's what was playing, and knowing where John Carpenter would go. Like,
yeah,
okay, I see you, John Carpenter.
Like a reverse Easter egg.
Yeah. But I mean, I haven't looked this up, but I'm interested, if I feel like John Carpenter must have kind of had that in his head, obviously, since he put it in there. He clearly was a fan of the movie. And then when he got all these profits from this movie that he was not expecting, like, I don't think John Carpenter, when, Halloween came out, that he thought he was going to make a dime off of getting a share of the net profit. And
initially, one of the producers, they were showing him a bit, and he's like, this is not scary, guys. This is not scary. And then they tagged it with Carpenter's score for it, and lo and behold, it was.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. Really, well, I mean, so John Carpenter's a musician, obviously, and he scored almost all his movies, basically, including the Siege / Attack on Precinct 13. Yeah, I mean, I love the theme song. I absolutely, or the theme music. It's not a song technically, but it's my favorite thing ever.
And they have the sheet music for it.
I used to actually have it as a ringtone way back in the day, and it was my favorite thing. Just that I actually enjoyed getting phone calls, not because I'd answer them, but just because I would happily listen to John Carpenter's Halloween theme. But yeah, like I don't know how big a fan of John Carpenter you guys are, but and especially of this particular, but A Big Trouble in Little China is another favorite of mine. And like all of that, again, music is all by him. And just it's a good time. He's an excellent musician. He actually has gone around and done concerts just of his music, and I really wish I'd gone to one, and I hope he does it again and I can catch one, because it's great.
That would be cool.
We were actually talking about like the soundtrack for this, and we were talking about some of the other like amazing soundtracks, and how there's something about the simplicity of the soundtrack, because it's not overly complicated. The music from Halloween is not overly complicated. It's just very, very scary. When we were talking about like the Jaws theme does something similar, where it's very simple. It's just a couple notes, but it's very, very evocative. And I feel like the shower scene in Psycho did something similar, where it was a repetition. It's a repetition, and it's a building repetition that gets you. And I'm like, yeah, I think this was incredibly effective. When I realized he's the one who wrote it, I'm like, okay, John Carpenter.
It feels like a cheat, but it's not.
I'm gonna need you to do less, please, because it's just too stupid good. It was the perfect music for his film to make it what it needed to be. Yeah. And I guess who better to make the music for the film than the man who wrote the film in the first place and was, developing it. So he knew exactly what he wanted behind that. So, but yeah, I just thought it was very interesting. I went in to see what all he wrote and directed. And I'm like, oh, everything. Okay, cool.
Yeah. Escape from New York, Big Trouble in Little China, Prince of Darkness, I think was one that he did. I'm a huge John Carpenter fan. I love almost everything he did. I mean, a lot of them are just B-movie hokiness, but The Thing, of course, obviously was excellent. And he clearly builds relationships because you'll see people in his movies, you'll see him again and again and again. Kurt Russell being one of the big ones, that you will just constantly see in a John Carpenter film. So,
wasn't Alice Cooper in Prince of Darkness? It's just like a little side character. Or am I thinking of another movie?
Mm-hmm. And I might be using the wrong name. Sorry. Make sure that is a John Carpenter film. Yeah, it is. I don't know that Alice Cooper was in it. I know almost like everybody who was in the cast of Big Trouble in Little China ended up being in Prince of Darkness, interestingly enough. With the exception, I think, of Kurt Russell. But a lot of the other supporting roles that were in Big Trouble in Little China ended up being there. I don't see him listed on the Google
Alice
search.
Cooper was in it. He played okay, his character's name is Street Schizo. So that'll tell you something about
Yeah, there we go.
That's what I thought.
Oh, now that you said that, now I'm remembering it. Yes.
Yeah, it was just a tiny bit hard,
But yeah, so I don't know. He does great stuff. Debra Hill did great stuff. I think it was a huge loss in the movie world when she died. But what are you gonna say? I don't know. I don't think that we can really say much more. It's an excellent film. Watch it. Just amazing what you could do with a low budget and innovation and creativity. And friends.
And I would have to agree that it does not particularly look low budget either. So they hit the mark with what they were aiming for.
Here's what this movie teaches you. Good director doesn't need a whole lot of money to make something that looks good and is good. Which I think, we see that in independent films all the time, but I think that sometimes people are like, throw money at it, it'll make it better. And sometimes you really need to stop doing that and pare it back a little bit and see what you can do, because he did this with nothing. And it stands as one of the best horror movies of all time. So I'm just saying.
In 2003, when the documentary that I mentioned before that Rebecca brought to Halloween, A Cut Above the Rest, it was the highest grossing independent film of all time.
Okay.
According to them. I think it's been outranked since, but still,
I mean, it has a 96% on Rotten Tomatoes, which I don't always look at, but seriously, 96% on Rotten Tomatoes is pretty impressive.
Yeah, I usually don't put much stock in their ratings, but if for a movie to get that, you are very correct that it does say a lot.
It's hard not to like it. I mean, if you don't like it, one, you probably don't like horror movies, and two, if you do like horror movies and you don't like this, then I'd say that your taste is probably very iffy.
Honestly, I don't even think you have to love horror movies, because we talked about it. It's not even that gory. So even if you're not a horror movie person per se, it's just a good, scary movie. It's perfect for the genre I would call scary movies, where it's like a date night movie where it's not super bloody, but you can watch it and kind of go and snuggle with each other. This is the perfect movie for that. This is that movie.
I can go for that.
With that, any more final thoughts, ladies?
No, I think we touched on a lot of it.
Great. So go watch the film and enjoy your Halloween.
Absolutely.
Happy Halloween, everybody.
Happy Halloween.
You have been listening to the Girls Go Schools podcast. You can follow us on Facebook or Instagram at Girls Go Schools podcast, on Twitter at Girls Ghost Pod. Like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, Girls Go Schools podcast, and find our podcast on your favorite podcatcher.